On a quiet Tuesday morning in early 2026, David sat at his kitchen table, staring at a number that refused to make sense. $143,000. That was everything he had saved for retirement at age 61. For decades, retirement had lived in his mind like a distant shoreline. You don't see it clearly when you're young. You just assume if you keep rowing, you'll get there. David had done what he believed responsible adults do. He worked full-time for 38 years. He bought a modest home. He paid taxes. He contributed to his company's 401k, sometimes consistently, sometimes not, depending on how tight things felt that year. Now, with 4 years until the age he once circled as his exit date, the shoreline didn't look closer. It looked farther away. And he's not alone. In 2026, national surveys show that nearly 60% of Americans aren't financially ready to retire. Not a little behind. Not slightly off track. Truly unprepared for the reality of living 20 to 30 years without a steady paycheck. For millions, retirement isn't a well-funded plan. It's a question mark. The shock isn't just in the percentage. It's in the gap between expectation and reality. Ask most Americans how much they think they need to retire comfortably, and the answer often lands somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million. That number feels like a safety net, enough to cover housing, healthcare, groceries, utilities, travel, emergencies, and maybe even helping grandkids with college someday. But when you look at actual savings balances, the story changes. A large share of households nearing retirement have less than $150,000 saved. Many have far less. Some have nothing at all beyond Social Security. The math becomes brutal when you stretch that across 25 years of retirement. Even modest monthly expenses can drain a six-figure account faster than most people realize. David did the calculation. If he retired at 65 with $150,000 and withdrew $2,000 per month to supplement Social Security, his savings would be gone in about 6 years, not accounting for inflation, medical surprises, or market downturns. 6 years. Retirement is supposed to last decades. That's when the fear creeps in. And it's not dramatic fear. It's quiet, practical. The kind that shows up in small decisions, postponing dental work, delaying home repairs, putting off vacations. It's the fear of becoming dependent on your children, the fear of running out of money at 82 and not being able to go back to work. What makes 2026 different is that this fear isn't isolated. It's widespread. Nearly half of adults under 65 now say they aren't confident they'll have enough income or assets to last through retirement. Confidence has been sliding for years, but recently it has dipped sharply. Something shifted. Part of it is visibility. People can see the gap more clearly now. Retirement calculators are easier to access. Financial headlines are louder. Social media is full of stories from older Americans who thought they were prepared, until they weren't. But there's another reason this moment feels heavier. Time is running out for an entire generation. Gen X, now in their late 40s and 50s, is entering what should be peak saving years. Instead, many are juggling aging parents, college-age children, and high housing costs. Baby boomers, once confident they would retire at 65, are quietly adjusting expectations to 67, 70, or whenever I physically can't work anymore. The dream hasn't disappeared. It's just being renegotiated. When David was 30, retirement felt automatic. Work hard, contribute steadily, trust the system. Back then, pensions were fading but still present. Healthcare costs were lower. Housing prices hadn't exploded. College tuition wasn't suffocating families for decades. Over time, though, the burden shifted. Responsibility moved from employers to individuals. The promise became, you are in charge of your future. That sounds empowering, until you realize most people were never taught how to manage that responsibility. Financial literacy remains uneven. Many Americans don't fully understand how much inflation erodes purchasing power over 20 years. They underestimate healthcare costs. They overestimate Social Security benefits. And they assume markets will deliver smooth, steady growth. But markets don't move smoothly. They swing. Every downturn, 2008, 2020, the volatility that followed left scars. Some workers paused contributions. Some cashed out retirement accounts during emergencies. Some never fully rebuilt what was lost. Now, in 2026, the consequences are visible. The 60% statistic isn't just about savings balances. It reflects something deeper: instability. Wages have risen in recent years, but so have expenses. Groceries cost more. Insurance costs more. Property taxes cost more. Healthcare costs far more. For many households, whatever extra income arrives gets absorbed immediately. Saving becomes aspirational instead of automatic. And yet, if you talk to people like David, you won't hear recklessness. You'll hear effort. He didn't ignore retirement. He just had life happen. A layoff in his early 40s. A medical emergency that wiped out an emergency fund. Helping his daughter through college because he didn't want her drowning in debt. Refinancing the house when interest rates changed. Each decision made sense at the time. Retirement, however, punishes small gaps over long periods. Missing 5 years of contributions early in your career doesn't feel catastrophic in the moment. Decades later, it is. The psychological impact of realizing you're behind at 60 is profound. Younger workers can say, "I'll catch up." Someone nearing retirement feels boxed in. There's less time for compound growth to work its magic. Catch-up contributions help, but they can't rewrite 30 years. That's why the 60% number hits differently in 2026. It isn't theoretical anymore, it's immediate. People are asking harder questions. Will Social Security still be fully funded when I claim it? What happens if I need long-term care? Can I afford to stop working? Or will I have to redefine retirement entirely? For some, the answer is clear. Retirement won't mean stopping work. It will mean shifting to part-time, gig work, consulting, or seasonal employment. For others, it means downsizing homes, relocating to cheaper states, or dramatically cutting lifestyle expectations. The golden years narrative, travel, hobbies, leisure, is quietly being replaced by something more cautious: survival. And yet, even inside this wake-up call, there's clarity. The data forces honesty. It strips away illusion. It pushes conversations that families once avoided. Spouses are sitting down with spreadsheets. Adult children are asking parents about savings. Employers are rethinking retirement benefits. Policymakers are debating long-term reforms. The 60% statistic is alarming, but it's also revealing. It shows that retirement insecurity isn't about laziness or irresponsibility. It's about structural shifts, rising costs, inconsistent savings access, and decades of economic turbulence landing at once. David closed his laptop that Tuesday morning and did something small but important. He called a financial advisor for the first time in his life, not because he believed a miracle was coming, but because the illusion was gone. Retirement isn't automatic. It isn't guaranteed. And in 2026, millions of Americans are waking up to that reality. Some early enough to adjust, others with only a few working years left. The shoreline is still there, but now, everyone can see how far away it really is. If retirement insecurity were caused by one bad decision, the fix would be simple. But that's not what happened. The reason nearly 60% of Americans aren't ready to retire in 2026 isn't laziness. It isn't ignorance. It isn't even a single economic crash. It's something slower, quieter, and more complicated. It's erosion. Not a dramatic collapse, just decades of pressure wearing people down, year by year. Take Maria, for example. She's 52, works in healthcare administration, earns a decent salary, and has always considered herself financially responsible. She contributes to her retirement plan. She avoids credit card debt. She tracks her expenses. And yet, her retirement balance isn't where it should be. Why? Because the math kept changing. Over the last 20 years, wages have increased, but so have the essentials. Housing costs surged. Rent in many cities doubled. Property taxes climbed. Insurance premiums rose steadily. Healthcare costs expanded faster than inflation. College tuition ballooned into a long-term financial commitment that often follows families for decades. Every time income grew, expenses grew with it. Saving became something squeezed into whatever space was left over. The structure of retirement itself also shifted beneath people's feet. A generation ago, pensions provided predictable income for life. Employers carried the investment risk. Workers simply showed up and built tenure. That model largely disappeared. In its place came defined contribution plans, 401ks, IRAs, where individuals shoulder the responsibility. The idea was empowering. You control your own future. But control requires knowledge, discipline, and consistency. Not everyone has equal access to those tools. Nearly half of full-time workers either don't participate in an employer-sponsored retirement plan or don't have access to one at all. That means millions must take the initiative to open and fund accounts on their own, something that's easy to delay when bills feel urgent. Automatic payroll deductions help. Employer matches help even more. But without them, saving competes with groceries, rent, childcare, and car payments. And life rarely waits patiently while you build your nest egg. Maria remembers 2008 clearly. She had just turned 34. Her retirement account dropped sharply during the financial crisis. She didn't panic sell, but she did reduce contributions temporarily because her husband's hours were cut at work. They told themselves it was temporary. It was, but that temporary pause lasted nearly 3 years. That gap, small at the time, cost them tens of thousands in long-term compounded growth. That's how erosion works. Not in one giant wave, but in small withdrawals from the future. Then came 2020, another disruption. Market volatility, job uncertainty, families dipping into emergency funds just to stay afloat. Some people withdrew retirement savings early to cover immediate needs, accepting penalties because survival mattered more than future comfort. By 2026, the pattern is clear. Many Americans experienced multiple economic shocks during prime earning years. Each shock reduced their margin for saving. And then there's debt. Student loans didn't just affect millennials. Many Gen X parents took on loans to help their children. Others are still paying off degrees from the 1990s. Servicing debt limits retirement contributions. It's hard to invest aggressively when monthly obligations feel heavy. Credit card balances, auto loans, and medical debt compound the problem. Even households with solid incomes often operate with thin liquidity. That fragility makes long-term saving feel risky, because money locked in retirement accounts can't easily be accessed without penalty. Healthcare adds another layer of uncertainty. Even with insurance, out-of-pocket expenses have climbed. High deductibles, prescription costs, unexpected procedures. These aren't rare events. They're common, and they chip away at savings. Then there's longevity. Ironically, living longer, a sign of progress, has made retirement planning harder. A 65-year-old today might live 20 or 30 more years. That means retirement savings must stretch across decades of inflation, market fluctuations, and rising medical needs. Most people underestimate this timeline. If you retire at 65 and live to 90, that's 25 years without earned income. That's longer than many careers. The required savings to fund that span is daunting. When surveys say Americans believe they need over $1 million to retire comfortably, they're not exaggerating. They're reacting to the math. But believing you need $1.2 million and seeing a balance of $180,000 creates psychological distance. The gap feels so wide that some people disengage. It's not that they stop caring, it's that the goal feels unreachable. Inflation in recent years made everything sharper. Even when wages increased, higher grocery bills, higher energy costs, and higher insurance premiums absorbed gains quickly. Families felt like they were running faster just to stay in place. That sensation, earning more but not advancing, discouraged aggressive saving. Meanwhile, the broader retirement safety net feels less certain. Conversations about potential Social Security funding challenges have created anxiety. Many workers doubt the system will provide full benefits when they retire. That uncertainty makes planning harder. Do you assume full benefits? Reduced benefits? Later retirement age? When foundational assumptions feel unstable, long-term planning becomes guesswork. There's also a cultural factor. For decades, retirement was framed as a finish line at 65. Work hard, retire, relax. That script no longer fits economic reality for many households. But the narrative lingered longer than the math did. People expected retirement to arrive naturally, like a scheduled event. Instead, they're discovering it must be actively engineered. Financial literacy gaps compound the issue. Many Americans don't fully grasp how much they need to save annually to reach $1 million target. They underestimate the impact of starting late. They overestimate the growth of small, inconsistent contributions. Compounding is powerful, but only if time and consistency are on your side. For someone starting serious saving at 45 instead of 25, the required contribution rate becomes dramatically higher. That's a difficult adjustment when peak earning years also come with peak financial responsibilities: teenagers, college tuition, aging parents, home maintenance. Maria often jokes that she's the sandwich generation. She supports her 78-year-old mother and her 19-year-old son. Retirement savings sits in the middle, squeezed. That squeeze defines 2026. It's not a single catastrophic failure. It's overlapping pressures: rising living costs, shifting retirement structures, economic shocks, healthcare uncertainty, longevity risk, debt burdens, limited access to employer plans. Each factor alone is manageable. Together, they create fragility. And fragility doesn't always look dramatic. It looks like households with some savings, just not enough. It looks like people who plan to retire at 65, quietly revising the number to 68, then 70, then we'll see. It looks like workers staying in jobs longer, not because they want to, but because the spreadsheet demands it. The 60% statistic isn't a story of irresponsibility. It's a story of structural strain meeting human limitation. People made rational decisions in difficult moments. They prioritized housing, health, children, stability. Retirement absorbed whatever was left. Now, as the first wave of Gen X approaches retirement age, the consequences of those trade-offs are visible. The system assumed individuals would save consistently over 40 years. Reality delivered interruptions. That's how it happened. Not through one bad choice. Through decades of small, understandable compromises, each one reasonable on its own, but collectively powerful enough to leave millions standing at the edge of retirement asking the same quiet question: how did we work this long and still feel this unprepared? If part 1 was the wake-up call, and part 2 explained how it happened, part 3 is where the numbers turn into faces. Because statistics don't lie awake at night. People do. James is 67. He was supposed to retire 2 years ago. There was even a small celebration planned at his office: a cake, a speech, a fishing trip the following week. Instead, he still wakes up at 5:45 a.m., pulls on his work boots, and drives 40 minutes to a warehouse job that's harder on his knees every month. He didn't miscalculate wildly. He saved. He invested. But inflation ate more than he expected. His wife's medical bills were higher than projected. And when he ran the numbers with a financial planner, the verdict was simple: retire now, and there's a real chance you'll outlive your money. So he postponed. That's the human cost of 60% not being ready. It's delayed freedom. For many older Americans, retirement used to represent rest, a transition from labor to leisure. Now it often represents risk. Stopping work doesn't feel like a reward, it feels like stepping off a financial cliff. The emotional weight of that shift is enormous. Work in your 20s feels temporary. Work in your 40s feels necessary. Work in your late 60s can feel frightening, especially if your body is tired. Physically demanding jobs become harder. Even desk jobs require energy, adaptability, and stamina. And yet millions are quietly recalculating. How long can I keep doing this? The psychological strain is rarely discussed. There's pride involved. Many don't want to admit they're not ready. Retirement has long been associated with success. You made it. To say you can't afford to stop working feels like a personal failure, even when the causes were largely structural. Linda, 63, worked in public education for 35 years. She imagined retirement filled with volunteer work and time with her grandchildren. But after reviewing her savings, she realized her pension would cover basics, barely. Travel would be out of reach. Emergencies would be stressful. So she took a part-time administrative role at a private tutoring center. "It's not what I pictured," she says, "but it buys me security." Security has replaced aspiration. That's the quiet shift happening across the country. Retirement planning conversations used to focus on lifestyle. Where will you travel? What hobbies will you explore? Now they focus on sustainability. How long will the money last? What if one of us needs long-term care? What if markets drop again? Healthcare looms especially large. Even with Medicare eligibility at 65, out-of-pocket costs remain significant. Supplemental insurance, prescription drugs, dental, vision, co-pays, these aren't minor line items. For retirees on tight budgets, one unexpected procedure can disrupt years of careful planning. The fear isn't abstract, it's specific. People worry about becoming financially dependent on their children. They worry about losing their homes. They worry about needing assisted living and watching decades of savings evaporate. Adult children feel the ripple effects too. When parents delay retirement or struggle financially, family dynamics shift. Some younger households anticipate helping parents while still paying off their own mortgages and student loans. That creates generational tension, not from lack of love, but from economic reality. The sandwich generation becomes a pressure point in both directions. Then there's the subtle loss of choice. When someone retires comfortably, work becomes optional. They might consult occasionally because they enjoy it. They might volunteer because they care. But the key word is optional. For the 60% who aren't ready, work often remains mandatory. That difference changes everything. James doesn't resent his job, but he resents that stopping feels dangerous. Every time his back aches after lifting heavy boxes, he wonders how many more years he can physically continue. He tracks his health more carefully now. An injury wouldn't just be painful, it would be financially destabilizing. Retirement insecurity turns health into a financial variable. And yet, despite the tension, there's resilience too. Some Americans are redefining retirement entirely. Instead of a hard stop at 65, they're planning phased exits, part-time work, flexible schedules, remote consulting. For certain professions, that's liberating. For others, especially physically demanding roles, it's far less feasible. A corporate consultant can ease into semi-retirement. A construction worker may not have that luxury. Inequality in retirement readiness mirrors inequality in career paths. Those with higher incomes and access to employer-sponsored plans have more options. Those who worked hourly jobs without consistent benefits face steeper challenges. But the emotional impact cuts across income levels. Even households with moderate savings often feel anxious. Market volatility in recent years reminded people that retirement accounts can swing dramatically. Watching a lifetime of savings dip during downturns is unsettling, especially when you're close to drawing from it. The 60% statistic doesn't mean 60% have nothing. It means 60% feel uncertain, and uncertainty changes behavior. People postpone travel. They delay replacing aging cars. They cut discretionary spending. They reconsider moving closer to grandchildren if housing costs are high. Every decision runs through the same filter. Can we afford this long term? For some, that caution is wise. For others, it's exhausting. There's also a quieter cost: identity. For decades, work shapes routine, purpose, social circles. Retirement is supposed to be a chosen transition into something new. But when retirement is delayed out of necessity, that transition feels less empowering. It feels reactive. Linda sometimes wonders who she'll be when she finally stops working. The timeline keeps moving. First 65, then 67, now maybe 70. She jokes about it with friends, but privately she worries. What if I wait too long to enjoy the years I'm healthy? That's the deepest human cost. Time is finite. Financial insecurity compresses the years people imagined for freedom. It turns what should be a season of choice into a season of calculation. And yet, this story isn't entirely bleak. The wake-up call is forcing conversations that were once avoided. More families are discussing retirement openly. More workers are seeking financial advice earlier. Employers are expanding automatic enrollment in retirement plans. Individuals are reassessing spending habits. Awareness, even painful awareness, creates movement. James recently increased his contribution rate, even at 67. It won't change everything, but it gives him agency. Linda is exploring lower-cost states where her savings would stretch further. Maria, from Part 2, has begun catch-up contributions and scheduled annual financial check-ins. These aren't dramatic transformations. They're steady adjustments. The human cost of retirement unpreparedness is real. Stress, delayed dreams, extended work, cautious living. But the human response is equally real: adaptation. The 60% statistic tells us many Americans aren't ready to retire in 2026. What it doesn't capture is their determination to regain control, to adjust, recalibrate, and redefine what retirement means. Maybe the golden years won't look exactly as once imagined, but they aren't gone. They're just being rebuilt, one decision at a time.